Hey everyone, Psychroyasin here, and in this video I want to talk about what I wish I knew about commissions and getting commissions in art, and maybe dispel some of the bad advice I received or advice that didn't really work for me. And since I am talking about what worked for me, I guess it's also something to keep in mind that this may not work for everyone, but it did work for me and it was pretty reliable. So yeah, results may vary. But okay, so one of the things I heard a lot when I was starting out looking for work was that artists shouldn't undercharge themselves, and that this was really something bad in the industry, because what happened is there were more established artists who were kind of at the top. So, these are tiers of artists, and these are like the more established ones. When there are a lot of people lower down who are charging much less, what happens is everyone ends up making less money. So, there's a lot of fear that I heard about, if you undercharge, you're not just screwing yourself over, you're screwing all artists over. And that made a lot of sense to me that, yeah, you shouldn't be undercharging. And they would talk about art as, how it's a profession that requires a lot of skill. And that's true, and it requires a lot of training. And if you think about it, it takes about as long to become a decent artist as it does to become a doctor. So there's a lot of energy that goes into making a good artist. The issue I found, though, is upon following this advice, it didn't really work. I don't think it's actually how the market works. Here, I'm not drawing anything that you should be paying attention to. I'm just sort of like, subconsciously making marks. But anyway, it's not really how the market works, because what incentive is there if you're down here in terms of skill? So let's say this is like the skill pyramid. Skill pyramid. And you're just starting out, and you're like at this stage where this is, pretty high pay, and this is pretty low pay. And there's a lot of people making not much money. But you're at this stage, but you are charging maybe this tier, like where the money's like kind of decent, but you're not at that level yet. Why would someone hire you? And also, how do you get better if you're putting yourself sort of like artificially? You're saying, well, this is what an artist should be making at least, and then people up here say, well, if there are too many people in this area, then they might not get chosen, and maybe people will hire people in this area, this tier. So the people here are afraid they'll go down here. So that's sort of like, yeah, that's a legitimate fear. But what happens is they say, okay, so everybody here charge like this, and then we don't have to worry about these people taking any money away, because we're still, more relatively, at the, it's everyone charges more, so the artwork is worth more, and then these people don't need to really be around in terms of the very, very low paying jobs. And that sounds fine, but the reality is, if you're starting out and you're here, how are you going to get here? It just doesn't really pan out. So what I thought, because again, I've been doing this for many, many years and trying different things. And I have aliases that I use for different art just because it's easier that way. People are judged on what they do, and you don't want to always show everybody all your stuff because you might not get certain jobs. So having an alias is not necessarily bad, because if reputation is really important, does it matter that you are known by one name or another? I don't personally think so, because what matters is skill and the product you deliver. Price, skill, the how well you've drawn the thing or painted the thing, and are you delivering on time and whatnot. So what I started to do is I thought, well, okay, let me try making an alias with no reputation, so I'm not like relying on my previous name or anything, and try to get seen. And the first thing that hits you is this wall that is, I guess, the exposure wall, where you want to get your work out there, but you have no subscriber base or follower base. Who's going to see your work? How are they going to find your work? And so it's tough. Even if you're really good, it's tough to like break through the barrier where you're actually seen by enough people that you can capitalize on whatever you have. And the idea is that you're hoping the world works where what is good rises. So like the cream on the top, if you put out good work, someone's gonna see it. That person's gonna share it. Whoever saw it is then gonna share it with even more people, and eventually you're gonna get seen, you're gonna get recognized, and that's gonna work for you. And that kind of is how it works. But there's something that happens when you are pretty good. So let's say you're like this level, right? Okay. And instead of charging at this level, when you're starting out anyway, you charge at this level. So now what's happening is you're undercutting people. And this sounds kind of scummy. Like, it sounds bad to say, well, I'm undercutting my competition. But actually in business, this is kind of how it works. Because if these people down here, they charge very little and they give a low skill product, not because, not because they're bad or anything, just because probably they don't have enough experience. They're just not good enough yet. So if you are charging the same price, but you're giving a much, like, even if it's just relatively, it's a relatively better product for a cheap price, you are now in demand, because there's a demand for like someone looking at that and saying, wait, I can get this quality for this price. Yeah, I'll take it. That's good. So because of that, what happens is you actually can get more work. And as opposed to if you were like charging these prices and your skill is still down here, who's gonna want you? You're overpricing for what you are. And even if you might get 1 or 2 commissions at that price, it's very hard to build on. Whereas if you're charging less and you're giving more, or let's say you're even at a stage where you're charging virtually nothing. And this is something that's really, people say, don't do work like this. I would say don't do work for companies like this. But there is something to be said for charging nothing, because you're not getting You're not just giving your art for free. If you think that way, I think you're missing the point of what you're actually getting, which is education. You're getting experience, and experience is so vital. So I actually don't believe in giving stuff away necessarily for free, but I do see that it's an option. You know, it's not something to completely dismiss, but I prefer the idea of you undercharge. And what happens is you will get a lot of people who can afford your services because you're charging so little. And what that is, I don't know, you just look at who's at your skill level, what do they charge, and then lower your price a bit and then charge that and see how it works. But the other thing that happens is because you get a lot of people who want your work because it's affordable and it's a good value for what you're offering, what happens is you get a lot of commissions. And then what happens from that is, let's say I have 10 commissions that I've done, okay? And I did one here, I did one here, I did this one, I did this one, I did one where someone wanted this person here, I did this one, someone commissioned me to do this one, someone commissioned me to do this one, someone commissioned me to do this one, and someone commissioned me to do this one. Okay, now I have 10 commissions, and let's say, for the sake of this, I charge $10 for each commission. So now I've got $100. All right. But that is not sustainable for living if it took me, maybe it took me like 5 days per commission, right? So you took 50 days. Okay. That's not enough to live on. But don't think about it that way in the beginning. You're not trying to make a living off art right away. And this is a thing where a lot of people think because you are told often we hear things like, you can't make a living as an artist. Well, you can. You can make a living as an artist, but because people say you can't, there's this feeling of, I need to make a living as an artist as soon as possible. You don't. That's not how it really works. But I'll get to it anyway. So you've made these 10 images. Now, maybe you wouldn't have thought of all these ideas. You know, maybe your own work, when you're doing work for yourself, is like this. And you get commissioned to do all these different things. Okay, but what you find out is now you have a bunch of works out there because, yeah, you know, you post them after you've done them, and you have market research where you can look at the views, like how many favorites are these getting, how many views are these getting. And what happens is you might discover, like, this one didn't do so well, 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 this one didn't do so well. These ones did better. So this one did better, this one did better, this one did better, and this one did better. And of these, like, your best one was like this one. Okay, so what can you then deduce from that? Well, the ones with not smiling faces didn't really do so well. And the ones where people are smiling, and maybe the one where they're not smiling as much, but the composition's a little more interesting, that did really well. Or relatively well. Okay, so then you could try things like, okay, well, what if we combine those two? We'll put the guy here, we'll make him really smiling, and he's sort of, you know, the composition is, let's just say, interesting. You got to use your imagination. I'm assuming everyone here are artists, so use your imagination to make what I did seem better than it is. But anyway, so then let's say you did this, and then you had like a big jump in the amount of views and follows and whatnot you got. So then you start getting more people asking if you can do commissions, and they're starting to reference it. They're trying to say, they're starting to say like, we saw this image and we really liked it. Can you do something like that for us? Or for me, because it would be an individual usually contacting you. So you're like, yeah, I can do it. And you do your job and you post it and it's doing well. And, you know, you kind of find the formula of what works. And for me, what works isn't what I thought would work, but it's just like I got a bunch of commissions, and then I got one guy who had this commission idea, and I tried it, and then that one was like way more popular than any of the others. And then I started getting commissions like, oh, can you make it like that one? And it's like, yeah, okay. And so what happens eventually is you will get a lot of people lining up for this type of commission. And if it takes you 5 days to do this, you just kind of can't. Once you've got people waiting, or you have to turn people down because you just don't have the time, that's when you raise your price. So maybe you go from 10 to 15. And what happens is if you have like a waiting list and you bump your price to 15 or maybe even $20, now it looks like for someone new coming in, say there's like a guy who just saw your work, maybe saw this one. It's like, wow, that's really cool. Okay, I want something like that. How much does this person charge? They'll look at your prices and they won't see 10 or 15 because you don't have that displayed anywhere. They see 20. Okay, so they think, well, okay, and there's a waiting list. So I'm assuming all these people paid the price, even though actually they didn't. They were all paying like 15 or 10 or whatever. You're like, maybe this one was 10. And then these ones were all 15. But they're going to think all these people paid 20, so they're happy to pay 20 because it just looks like that was your price. And what you do is every time you develop a waiting list of, you can come up with a number yourself, let's say 10 people or 5 people on that list, then you raise your price. And so anyone new just assumes that's what it is. And so you can go from 20 to maybe next one is 30. Maybe then you go to 45. Maybe then you go to, I don't know, 60. And, you know, eventually you move up 100 plus. And you'll, first of all, because you're doing so many commissions, you're getting a ton of experience. You're actually learning what works. And because you're doing so many things, you actually develop a very streamlined flow where you start to be able to do things much faster. If it used to take you 5 days, you might be able to whip them out in 3 days. The other option is that you might be taking longer. Maybe it takes you 7 days now. But whereas before you started here, you are here. After doing it, let's say you did it for a year, maybe your skill is now here. You're here now. Okay, so now you've moved up in skill and your price is, you kind of, the way I see it, you always want to be good value for what you're offering. So maybe now you charge like this price point because you moved up. And then when you're here, you charge this price point. And in the end, people are always willing to pay for this big one. The reason is because the thing they're paying for when they pay for a very known artist is not just the skill involved, but it's prestige. It's to know, like maybe on one hand, it could be, this is a famous artist and I want my work done by a famous artist because when they post it, everyone's going to see my original character. Or maybe it's something like, I grew up seeing this person's work because they've been around for a while and they were one of the first artists I saw and I really liked their work and I'd always had them in my mind. And so when I finally could, you know, maybe 5 years later, I got a job and I was making some decent money and I wanted a commission, and who did I think of? Well, I thought of that artist who I really admired, and maybe they saw you when you were like at this stage, and they thought you were like great, and now you're at this stage and you are the person they want. So even though at the top the skill, you are good at skill, you are good skill wise, but you also charge a ton. It doesn't mean that you won't get money. It means fewer people will be there to pay you, but there are people who have quite a bit of money who pay for stuff. So that's something to consider. And then all your experience is now helping you because you've got things like a portfolio, and you didn't need to figure out what sells in terms of guessing, because you just look at, you do the work. Maybe someone gives you a novel idea, like, okay, I want you to do this other thing where like the face is not even on the page, or I mean, whatever, and then you find out like, oh wow, that was even more successful. And then people are like, we want to see more of that, and they pay you for that. So that is something very important, and that's something I wish I knew, because in the beginning I didn't know anything, and so I was just taking everyone's word for, as if it was almost like the gospel, like this is what you need to know because this famous artist is saying so. And I mean, even now I'm basically doing that too. So what I want, or what I would ask you to do, is think about what I'm saying and see if it makes sense to you, and then see if you have problems with it. Think about those. Like, maybe you're right. Maybe there is something missing. I'm just saying this is what definitely worked for me. And so what are some of the pitfalls that I have experienced when doing this? One thing is separating yourself from your work and realizing that what you do on your own time, the images you make, they are personal. However, the images you do for commissions are a job. So if you put yourself in your work, this can work for some people, but it can actually lead to burnout for other people, and it can be very difficult because in the end, whenever you do something a lot, it becomes a job. It's just kind of how it is. Even if it's like the most fun thing and you love doing it, at some point it still is like, I like doing this, but I do this all the time. It's kind of monotonous. So not putting yourself into the work can sometimes, for me anyway, it's really helped. And having an alias where it's like not really me and I don't tell anyone who I am or whatever, that helps too. Because it creates a degree of separation. And it means that when I do work for myself, it is personal. And when I show it to people, I'm showing them work that I actually care about, on a more fundamental level, and it has nothing to do with money. It's all whatever I want to make, that's what I make. There's no trying to get views or likes or anything. I'm not attention seeking. I'm not trying to make a buck or anything like that. I'm just doing work for myself. So it keeps this very pure. And it makes this much easier. The other thing it does, and another thing that helped me a lot, is I have a very people-pleasing, somewhat weak personality in some ways. Like, I want people to feel good. I want them to be happy with what I've given them and stuff. And it's very hard for me to say no, or it's very hard for me to negotiate and things. Having an alias can really help in this, because what happens is you can kind of adopt a persona that's a little bit different than your own. And that's what I did. I thought, okay, my persona is more aggressive. So, maybe I would say something like, maybe I'll do this image. I'm not really happy about it. I don't really want to do it, but maybe, okay, Whereas my persona is like, no, I'm sorry, I don't do those images, or no, that doesn't interest me. And they're just a lot more straightforward. So that also helps. Having a clear set of what you do, what you're willing to do, and what you're not willing to do. Now, I said keep your personal thing separate from your job, and I think that's really important. But I also think equally important is that you don't do things you really hate. If for me that's backgrounds, I really don't enjoy backgrounds, so I don't take jobs with backgrounds. On the few occasions I do, I charge a lot of extra for that. So people are paying a lot more if they want me to do something I don't want to do. But what I'm realizing is even for those ones that pay extra, they just tend to, I procrastinate more. It makes life less enjoyable. And so I just don't take them. That's what I'm starting to learn. Like, it's never worth it when someone offers you something and it's like, wow, this sounds like a good opportunity. I don't really want it, but it sounds like a good opportunity. And I still sometimes fall into this where I'll take on jobs where it sounds good. It's like, hey, this pays a lot and it's not that much work. And there's this feeling like, okay, I guess I don't really want to do it, but I guess I can't turn it down. And then what happens is it affects everything else. Like, I'm just tired more. It's easier to get depressed. You get more grumpy, and people around you enjoy your company less. And it just sort of builds on itself. So ideally, starting low and charging very little also has this other benefit of you're undercharging. So I'm worth more than this. And that gives you this kind of freedom, actually, to worry less about mistakes and things because, and you don't want, like, I still try to do the best job I can on the work I put out, and I encourage people, do your best. But if you make a mistake, it's much easier to make mistakes when you're charging very little than when you charged a lot, because the person who maybe received the work, and if they weren't that happy, they didn't invest tons into it. They invested, a small amount. It's not a big deal. And that helps. The other thing I do, I make this very clear, is no revisions. Revisions and this type of back and forth process where you're with a client, some people really enjoy that. And for me personally, I don't enjoy it because what happens is the back and forth eats up a lot of time, and I just don't have the brain for it to remember, like, because if I was working on, let's say, this person's commission, and then they're like, oh, I need a sketch for approval, and then it's like, well, I've got to wait because I emailed them the sketch. Now I'm waiting. That looks like something else. Now I'm waiting for approval, so I guess I'll work on this one, and then no, I'm waiting for this one, and this one still hasn't gotten back, so I'll work on this one. Now it's like all confusing. So I offer no revisions, and I don't say that's like the best thing. I think some people are comfortable with offering limited revisions, like one revision. But the thing with revisions is they do eat up time. And also by saying no revisions, what it means is, and I make this very clear to people commissioning me, is they need to submit everything in the beginning. They need to give me all the references or whatever is required, all the information as much as they can. Give that to me beforehand. Then I say whether or not I'll take that commission. Like, I might be like, I'm sorry, that's not something I do. But because I said no revisions, if they didn't give me enough information, I will really work hard to try to give them exactly what they wanted. But if at the end they're like, oh, I forgot, this character wears a hat, can you add a hat? I will say no, that was not discussed earlier on. I don't offer revisions. and it's kind of on them because they didn't give me the information. If, however, they said, I wanted a hat and it's on the document we agreed to, then I will do it, because it's like, no, then it's my bad. If it was there and I didn't do it, it's my bad. If it was not there and I didn't do it, then it's their bad. So that's the other thing. And then, it takes time. For me, I spent, I think I came in at $15, which is, I would say in terms of tier of artist, maybe I'm like here, middle tier artist. I was charging like this much, the low tier. I just wanted to see what would happen. And then I moved up to 40, I think. And then I was there for like 6 months. And then I moved up from there to, 70, 80, 90, and then over 100 and whatnot. But that took about, it's been like a couple years, maybe more than a couple of years that I've been doing this stuff. And it's very slow, especially in the beginning. But don't worry about it. That's what I told myself. Like, I was still making money doing other stuff, so I didn't need the money for commissions. But if I was doing it, from scratch, let's say I was a student, or I was just in my early 20s, or 16, 17, something like that, what I would consider is, this is not about making money. This is about school. Like, treat this as school. The market is your teacher. The market will teach you what is successful, what is not successful, what techniques that you do work more, what don't work. And suddenly likes and dislikes stop being a popularity contest of, I feel good about myself because I got a like, and more like something detached, a little more just like, oh, this product happened to sell more than that product. People really liked this color scheme. Oh, good to know. It's a bit of market research. Has nothing to do with me personally, because, as I said, I treat it just as a job. It is not personal. But that doesn't mean I don't do personal artwork. That means my personal artwork is more personal. So, that is pretty much what I have to say. The final thing is that whatever you like shows. If you're interested in something, if you really like drawing cars, for instance, then when you draw cars, it will show. You will do better work. So if you start at low risk in the beginning and you start with what you like, just trust that there are enough people who like what you like in the world. You may have to find them. It might not be easy. Some people are really lucky, and the things they like, their tastes, happen to be what also is popular in the mainstream. Maybe you love a specific game, and that game is very popular, and you do fan art of the characters because you love it, and you like doing that, and it just happens to take off. That's good. But if you really don't like the game, for instance, you don't really like it, but you think like, that's what makes money, that's what I should do, that's a road to disaster, because even if you become successful, you'll be one of those people who spends their entire day doing stuff they actually don't like. Much better to plan it right from the start. Make sure when you are successful, it's for something you want to do and not something you don't want to do. So, with that said, that's my talk. I hope it helps, and thanks for watching.